Good afternoon. Well, it's cold. It's 40 something, low 40s, and there's a wind up, which doesn't help at all. And I can almost hear my mom saying I should put a hat on, but I don't like hats that much, although I have a couple. The news today is kind of interesting. Amazon has laid off how many workers? It is 10,000 workers, which is 3% of its workforce, and I assume that they would tell us more about what's going on if we knew what the size of the workforce was at the beginning of the pandemic, because I imagine that these extra workers came on, and maybe that's not the case, but I don't have the stats. And now, when more people, for good or bad reasons, are not working remotely and are going out and purchasing rather than from the e-store that Amazon is, they don't need those workers. Also, they've introduced some pretty sophisticated programs about how they box and send out things. And so the Industrial Revolution changed into the information age, changed into bad news for a lot of workers and a lot of firms. Also, the nature of how they're employed sometimes as a contractor gives them no rights. And in Virginia, you have no rights as an employee, and very strong laws against workers' rights, and that's why a lot of firms come here, which doesn't say anything good about them. The courts have a couple of interesting things going on. In Georgia, in Fulton County, a judge down there said, "Oh, that 6-week law about abortions, it's unconstitutional." He threw it out, and he said that it violated the Georgia Constitution. That's interesting and encouraging, but it also was unconstitutional because at the time they did it, Roe v. Wade was extant, meaning that it applied and they had to respect it and so forth. Then we have, I don't know if you remember, Judge Sullivan in D.C. Well, he killed Trump's ban on migrants because of COVID. He says, well, he threw that out, so that's pretty interesting. Those among us who remember 1984 and the Ministry of Truth or Untruth or Injustice, you get a kick out of the fact that the head of China says, "Oh, that's not a war in Ukraine." Talk about rewriting the meaning of a word. Talk about deceiving people who know better than to believe that. George Will, he had an interesting statement. And I like George, although I rarely agree with him, but he writes well. He writes beautifully, actually. And his argument was that this is a change, or a chance rather, for the Republicans to repent their ways after the midterm elections. Okay, anybody out there, raise their hands who thinks that the Republicans are going to mend their ways. Now, the leadership on both sides of the hill in the Republican Party have asserted themselves, and the question remains, what will they do when the test comes for who's in charge? And the real question will be for McCarthy, because there'll be, when the dust settles, probably only a couple of votes that give the Republicans control, and so there's a lot of opportunity to do mischief. The course of our progress toward a more enlightened civilization in that area between the Atlantic and the Pacific and Mexico and Canada is going to be our challenge. And I haven't heard much that encourages us. I guess we're still in the silly season. That is to say, we're waiting to see what happens in Georgia. We haven't yet finished the House races to know how that's going to work out. We have the budget bill. People want to run away to their home districts and their families. And so it's a mishigas. And it's probably going to be that way for another few weeks. But this is a good time for us to double down on prosecuting Trump. It's hard to believe it hasn't already happened. Anybody, and I didn't watch the performance last night, and I don't want to read anything that tells me what he said, although I did read one story, it was a very thin one, talking about how he didn't call himself the comeback kid, but he's on the comeback run. Well, I'm hoping that he's going to just sink further and deeper into the ooze he created. That is the criminality, the disrespect for law and order, the lack of demeanor, the lack of high hopes and ambitions for a nation. We don't need his kind of trash. And when we finally come to grips with the fact that that's what he is and that's all that he is, maybe we can kick Garland out of office, or he'll do something despite his fears and cowardice and beliefs that we shouldn't do anything to a president, sort of reflecting back, as the Federalists do, to the monarchical notion of what our president is. And that's why the Jefferson Republicans, the Democrat Republicans at the beginning of our country under Jefferson made so much more sense. And for the democracy that we would be and have been, and that these people have compromised, this has got to be an end to that, because we have to now win the hearts and minds of the citizens that we really can and will make a difference. We have to assure them that we're back to do business, their business, the people's business, whereas the Republicans, no such thing. So it's like I said, it's a brisk day, but it's beautiful out. Sunlight is nice. I always think of Tuscany light when that kind of yellowish light comes in at an angle toward the end of the day. And there's a lot of that that's accompanying the cold. So here I am in my cathedral of trees, saying good evening to you. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.